Hello, everyone. My name is Aaron Christensen. This is Horror 101 with Dr. AC, celebrating classic horror throughout history with new episodes every Friday night. Before Steven Spielberg became Steven Spielberg, he was a young TV director searching for an opportunity to prove what he could do behind the camera. That opportunity arrived in November 1971 with Duel, a lean, nerve-shredding thriller produced for ABC's Movie of the Week. Made on a modest budget and shot in just under 2 weeks, Duel remains one of the most astonishing directorial debuts in American cinema, not just because of its spectacle or scale, but also how masterfully it transforms an ordinary situation into sustained terror. Adapted by Richard Matheson from his original short story, Duel follows traveling salesman David Mann, played by Dennis Weaver, as a routine drive through the California desert turns into a relentless pursuit by a mysterious tanker truck and its unseen driver. Spielberg and his expert team exploit that simple premise with remarkable precision. Every stretch of empty highway, every glance at the rearview mirror becomes charged with dread. The truck itself emerges as one of the great monsters of 1970s cinema, a growling, smoke-belching machine with no clear motive beyond intimidation and destruction. As a historical artifact, what makes Duel so fascinating is how completely Spielberg understood visual storytelling from the beginning. The dialogue is sparse, character details are minimal, and exposition is kept to a bare minimum. Meanwhile, suspense is built almost entirely through editing, camera placement, and sound design. Spielberg turns gas stations, roadside diners, school buses, and open desert landscapes into arenas of psychological warfare. Viewed today, Duel is both a self-contained masterpiece and a blueprint for Spielberg's future. Its themes of ordinary people confronting overwhelming forces, its meticulous suspense mechanics, and its instinct for audience identification echoes throughout films like Jaws, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and beyond. From the very beginning, Spielberg understood how to seize an audience's attention and never let off the accelerator. Buckle up, everybody. It's going to be a hell of a ride. We're going to be talking about Duel from 1971, celebrating its 55th anniversary. And we've got an incredible panel to chat about it with me. Let's bring everybody in. And let's say hello to Christiana
Hello.
Benedict, Michael Klug.
How do?
And rounding out our carpool, Cullen Wade.
Hey everybody, I'm Cullen, and honestly, I don't know if I can call myself the head of my household.
We are going to be talking about Duel from 1971, celebrating its 55th anniversary, and we will be talking spoilers, so just prepare yourselves, everybody. Thanks for coming on the show, and welcome. I'm so excited. Take this expression as you will, a long ride to get here. But here we are. I'd like to just talk about people's origin stories, like how they came to this movie. Obviously, it is Steven Spielberg's first feature, but it started off on television. I'm curious if people saw it on TV or DVD, or how'd you come to this movie? Christiana, kick us off.
I saw it on television. I don't think that I saw it the night it first aired in 1971, but I know I saw it during the 1970s, sometime probably after Close Encounters had come out. It was on TV all the time back then. It's not true, by the way, that it's his first feature, because the first episode of Columbo is feature length.
Fine, all you sticklers out there.
In fact, that episode of Columbo is how he got the job to direct Duel in the first place, because he showed them the assembly cut because it hadn't aired yet.
I didn't see this till college, and I want to say somebody blindly showed it to me, or I got the VHS sight unseen, because I can't remember exactly how it went. I just remember being completely blown away. Like, I had no idea what I was going in for, and it did not disappoint in any way, shape, or form. But I was probably 20.
I was probably 22, which would have made it 2005. Sorry, I was probably 20 also, which would have made it 2005. So I definitely did not have the opportunity to see it when it aired as the ABC Movie of the Week. But I sought it out because I'd already seen all of the Spielberg films that one is expected to have seen, by that age and that time. I had heard about it. It's possible that I sailed the high seas for it. I think I actually watched the original TV cut first.
Nice.
because I don't remember the scenes that were added for the theatrical version. I do not remember those from the first time I watched it. You're sort of like Michael. I had no idea what I was going in for. This is definitely not the Spielberg. It's definitely not AI, artificial intelligence.
Yeah, this was one that I definitely saw on TV, and I believe it screened like on a Saturday afternoon matinee. I remember seeing the commercials for it. Anybody who grew up in the 70s, especially around this time, there were a ton of car chase type movies, Vanishing Point and Dirty Mary, Crazy Larry, and Bullet, obviously. But this actually came out the same year as French Connection. I hadn't put those two together as well. But this was one that I don't even think I had associated with Steven Spielberg. I think I just knew that it was a fun car chase movie. But when I actually sat down and watched it, that's when you realize, oh, it's a bit of a horror movie. There's a monster, and it's in the form of an 18-wheel truck. You are seeing a young Wunderkind Steven Spielberg, who, under these incredible restrictions of shooting for television, I think he had 10 days originally, and they gave him a few extra to finish it up. But my goodness, what a great little movie. Sid Sheinberg knew what he was doing when he brought Spielberg over to Universal and said, this kid's going to be somebody someday. Christiana, you and I have been talking offline like throughout the week. You said you had a lot to say. What would be the first of the many things you have a lot to say?
The first thing that I would say is that it's all right there in the story. The story by Richard Matheson came out in 1964, based on a real incident when Matheson was, menaced by a truck on the road the day that JFK was shot. Matheson figures pretty heavily in Spielberg's career. Not only this film, but he also wrote the Twilight Zone episode that Spielberg covered in the Twilight Zone, also wrote for Amazing Stories. I think Richard Matheson is the most influential horror writer of the 20th century, and that includes Lovecraft. I mean, Lovecraft is certainly influential among a certain type of horror fan, but Matheson had a mass audience. The Incredible Shrinking Man in the 50s. He's on the Twilight Zone. Everybody saw the Twilight Zone. Everybody has seen Nightmare at 20,000 Feet. More mainstream big hits than Lovecraft ever had. And he's the primary influence on Spielberg's brand of the uncanny and Stephen King's brand of the uncanny. And Duel is a great example of this. He emphasizes the horror in the everyday. There is nothing supernatural about Duel whatsoever. It is something, and it came from a commonplace thing that happened to him on the highway. Everybody can probably put themselves into David Mann's position if they've ever been, surrounded by trucks on the highway and very nervous about that. That's absolutely King's brand. And it's Spielberg's brand. I mean, you look at something like Close Encounters of the Third Kind. You've got these weird, uncanny things happening to Roy Neary around a dinner table. And Matheson is really sort of the architect of what TV horror felt like in the 70s, because he's got this. He wrote The Night Stalker and The Night Strangler. He wrote a bunch of those gothic films like Dracula and Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde for Dan Curtis. He wrote Trilogy of Terror, which I think scarred an entire generation who saw that in the 1970s. And of course this.
Trilogy of Terror, also an ABC movie of the week, right? I caught the tail end of the movie of the week, like the event made for TV movie era in the 90s. It was kind of petering out. But it seems like such an interesting era to me because it's indicative of the monoculture. If you were watching television, you were watching network television. And if you were watching network television, most likely you would have seen this film. So there was water cooler element to it, and you had the complete opposite of this atomized media landscape we have now. So there's a really major conversation steering, if you'll pardon the pun, culture that way, which I think is really interesting. Your point about Matheson being more influential than Lovecraft, I think is a great one. I would throw it in a nomination for Shirley Jackson, maybe her and Matheson together, because I think when you read early King, it's basically a one-to-one fusion of Matheson and Jackson, and you get early King, essentially you get modern horror lit, and the same thing of the grounded always grounded in the horror of the everyday.
Well, Hell House and The Haunting of Hill House are basically the same story. It's just that one is the elegant literary version and the other one is the pulp version.
Yeah, and that is the duality of horror,
And we are joined by JK.
My apologies to everyone out there. Getting off from school in third graders is not an easy task. The stuff of horror. So my apologies, and I had no trucks chasing me afterwards, so we're all good.
The bus did break down, though.
Michael, you're a writer as well, so I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are about Matheson and the script and how this translates as a screenplay.
Well, I've never read the actual source material, which shame on me. But two things that Christiana said, just offhand, the other, I know you got it right there. Didn't Richard Matheson work on the script for Jaws 3? Am I remembering that correctly? But anyway, the other thing I wanted not to go against what you said, but I do think there is a supernatural element to Duel. We don't know who this guy is. We don't know if he's not that he's inhuman, but there's nothing to suggest that he's not human. Like I don't know. We get no information to that, and it seems to me that there's something else going on there. Maybe that's me just imprinting my own wishes on it, but I've always thought that there's something else going on there. It's not just, and yes, I get the symbolism of man versus machine, and that's kind of the basic thing we're looking at, but there's something else going on there. That's just kind of what I've always thought.
There's an inhumanity to it, even if it's not supernatural. It doesn't feel like it's a struggle between two humans. It feels like it is David Mann up against something that is larger than him.
Yeah.
Jay, how'd you come to this movie for the first time?
It was Bravo's Scariest Movie Moments back in 2002. And they talked a lot about it. And just, that was very much an introduction to some films I had never seen within the genre. And I absolutely loved the film. I love the aspect, that dynamic of, I don't look at it as human versus machine. I look at it as good versus evil. And I look at it at times as a manifestation of the trauma he's going through. Because there's certain times in that movie you wonder if that is just his mind splintering and it's not even really there. That's the beauty of this particular film.
What was the scariest moment that Bravo highlighted?
Two things. One, Lance Henriksen talking about the railroad tie that's on the front of the truck and how terrifying that was. And also the idea that just the interaction as heading towards the third act, when the truck all of a sudden becomes like extraordinarily aggressive towards him, where it's literally on top of him and it's blowing through the animal farm and everything else. That's the scariest moments that they talked about.
Poor snake lady. That's more sad.
Yeah, the poor critters. I feel bad for the critters.
As I was revisiting it, I did not know Dennis Weaver from Gunsmoke. I did not know him from McCloud. This is pretty much what I know him from. Yep. And then later, when I would see Touch of Evil, I'd be like, oh, it's Dennis Weaver, who I know from Duel. But it is such a one-man show. It is so much about him in that little car. Again, I give such credit to Spielberg because he manages to make that, one person's insular experience of driving down a road and manages to make it cinematic, with all of his different camera techniques. But I love the first 5 minutes of this movie where you're just basically behind the wheel of the car. Certainly something that would not have resonated for me as like a 12-year-old in the same way that it resonates for me now. One overpass after another, one street sign becomes another, the radio becomes just kind of this backdrop, the landscape changes. This is my favorite movie when I think of road trips. And like whenever I'm on a road trip, I think about this movie and I think about The Hitcher. And it's ironic that we just covered The Hitcher a few episodes ago. I'm about to go on a road trip, so I have both of those movies very fresh in my mind. As we were alluding to when we talked about Matheson, I think Spielberg is really capturing this everyday experience of driving in a car. And it's the great what if. You're driving along, and what if a truck, that if you pass them, they decided that they were going to take that as a personal insult and punish you for it. Who would believe that idea could be sustained over 90 minutes? And yet, thanks to the skill of Spielberg and the premise of Matheson, it manages to do just that.
A few things. First of all, you unlocked a memory, which I meant to mention earlier, which is that I did see this very shortly after Touch of Evil and was really excited when I made the connection. And I was in a big Orson Welles and Hitchcock phase at that time. And there is so much Hitchcock in this. I did not notice the score very much ripped off from the Psycho score. Especially that one cue. Weaver, I just want to throw this in because you were talking about how good his performance is and how insular it is. I agree. I think he's incredible. My one knock against this movie, I think this is just a powerhouse of a movie. My one knock against it, I could have done without the voiceover. The cafe, and he's thinking through, what if I do this? What if I leave? What if I confront one of the guys? How far could I get? Like, could I outrun the thing? It's all on his face. He's doing that with acting. The voiceover is just so superfluous. I feel like, unfortunately, if it were not for that voiceover, it would be, a perfect film, honestly.
I disagree. I actually like the voiceover because since he's always by himself, I mean, there's really no dialogue. I actually like that idea. To veer off a little bit, but talking about the thing that kind of bothers me about it, this is one of the most annoying, whiny characters ever. I mean, we're sitting there watching last time, I'm like, geez Louise, this guy sucks. I mean, he just, there's just, which is great. I think Dennis Weaver's incredible in it, but man, this guy's a loser. He's just whining about everything. And I don't know, that struck me as an interesting thing. It's like, what are we getting out of this, Spielberg and Matheson? Like, what are we taking away from this? I mean, obviously there's the talk of, that he kind of mans up by the end of the film. So maybe that's kind of what it's meant to be. He's like finally trying to take control. But yeah, he's very difficult to like. And, it's like, and he's our only character.
I think the milquetoast presentation of David Mann is by design. And I think, Dennis Weaver is playing into that. He got the gig because Spielberg remembered him from Touch of Evil, where he is like, hysterical and not in a funny way, in a scary way.
Yeah.
Going back to the idea of the voiceover, I agree, Cullen. I don't think it's necessary, but it doesn't bother me. Dennis Weaver's doing so much. There was part of me that was wondering what this movie could play like without any dialogue at all. The call to his wife basically just sets up that he's not the head of the household. He's supposed to be home by a certain time, but beyond that, it really is just him and him trying to deal with the situation.
I think it's a symbiosis with the car and him. I think of pro wrestling after watching it, where you've got this mammoth muscle guy and then you've got this little underdog guy. And to build that mammoth muscle guy, you've got to make him look like he is so powerful compared to everything, that it's going to take every little bit, the David and Goliath of it, for him to even survive. And it's by all of a sudden the truck forgetting how to drive and hit the brakes that the movie's over. I mean, it's a little bit lackadaisical, but that inner monologue really reflects a lot of what Spielberg was doing with the car radio, because the car radio is your headspace, his inner thoughts. I've listened to talk radio all my life, and I'm listening to music, and I get yelled at a lot by my fiance, and she's right a lot of times to turn off the radio, but I need that noise in my head, because if not, my thoughts flood what's going on in there. When he's out of that car, if he's not talking to someone, he's by himself. Spielberg has to keep that dialogue going to be able to show. Do I think it could be cut back? Do I think it could be cut away? Absolutely. But there's definitely a reason why it's of use in it.
Well, this is a movie that's really dealing in archetypes. I mean, the fact that he's driving a Plymouth Valiant should be the dead giveaway there. I mean, the fact that he's named man, you can interpret that as man versus machine. But I think that the beginning of the film, with the way that it uses the radio, I mean, you have the talk radio, and it's mostly about a crisis in masculinity. He becomes a symbol of a broader crisis in society. And the movie is about reconstructing a more traditional masculinity that's heroic rather than sort of get along to go along, sort of modern milquetoast salaryman masculinity that he begins as. This movie reminds me a little bit of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, by the way. The way that it uses the radio to create a mood, which is exactly something that Hooper does at the beginning of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. There's also a certain grittiness to the depiction of the truck. It's a very sweaty movie. In the grander scheme, in addition to being a reconstruction of masculinity, it's also sort of an iteration of man versus the cosmos, a la Moby Dick. You know, you have the small man struggling against the white whale, in this case, the truck.
Yeah, that masculinity crisis, it feels very 70s. There were a lot of those kind of narratives. This movie, in addition to Texas Chainsaw, which Straw Dogs and Deliverance has those elements too, the sort of that like John Bly reclaiming the iron, masculinity that we've lost as like office drones and workers and stuff, which is incredibly problematic because basically the way the movie ends, that shot on Weaver when he realized he's killed someone, at what cost do we cosplay Blood and Thunder, and why are we so eager to like plunge ourselves back into the jungle?
No, I like that idea of examining what is asked of a man when violence is visited upon him.
One of the things, I don't know if it was brought up, but believe it or not, this is a serial killer film. I don't know if anyone had brought that up. If you look at the plates at the front of the car,
Yes.
and I never realized that until I watched it again at all of them, because at first you know trucks have plates, and all of a sudden you're looking, you're like, Mexico, Montana. It's like this was, you talk about that challenge of masculinity, and I think it's taken to the umpteenth degree, because you look at the majority of the serial killers, males are the majority of serial killer, and to get that visual representation of it on the front of the truck was something that I found astounding. So I'm glad I'm not the only one who noticed this.
No, but I watching it last night, that I noticed the exact same thing. I'm like, did you notice all those plates? I wanted to talk a little bit about the Texas Chainsaw thing, because I had the exact same thought last night watching it for two reasons. The kind of banjo-y music that was playing at one point, straight out of the van that the kids are driving in Texas Chainsaw. But then you saw that van go by, like a very similar, I think it's a Ford. It drives past him when he stopped at some point, and I'm immediately like, oh, it's the kids. They're on their way to, to Grandpa's grave or whatever. But yeah,
3 years to get there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the serial killer aspect of it, you get the sense that this is a beast that roams the highway all over. And there's something about the fact that it has covered such a wide swath of road that it can't be caught, right? It is constantly on the move. It is the shark that would later show up for Spielberg at 75. It is moving constantly, and it is claiming victims along the way. And we see its modus operandi. Like he has all of these different tactics that the truck driver uses to get his victims either off the road or into accidents and things like that. I also think it's really kind of twisted and bizarre that the truck comes around and helps the school bus.
Yes, that was fantastic.
Great humor in it, yes.
Yeah, that was before Spielberg decided he liked kids.
That wasn't in the original cut of the film. They filmed that after the film had actually aired,
Right.
when they wanted to sell it in Europe. That scene, the opening when he pulls out of the driveway, the train scene where the truck is pushing him towards the train. Yeah, the one where he's calling his wife.
Which is straight out of Touch of Evil. I feel like he must have decided on that composition as an ode to Dennis Weaver, because there's that scene where you have the woman in the foreground in Touch of Evil when Heston's trying to make a phone call, and it's just like her. It's a fairly personal call, and her just like presence in the foreground, like almost blocking your view of him. Yeah, it's a great little touch. And that piece of dialogue, more than anything else, I think, is driving home that. I mean, we had the hints of it with the radio chatter and stuff like that, but just like, oh, his wife wants him to go beat up this guy that disrespected him. That's what's eating at him this whole road trip.
The connection to Touch of Evil sort of attaches itself to the way the scene in the cafe is filmed too, because that's a oneer. I mean, that just follows him out of the parking lot into the bathroom, then back out of and it's like a 3-minute shot. And that's like the first instance of that kind of shot in Spielberg's filmography, and he uses that kind of shot a lot throughout his career.
As we were watching last night, my husband had an interesting theory, and I definitely wanted to bring it up to y'all. He is actually the first one to pass the truck, but if you'll notice, he's passing a solid line. And obviously, we're not really giving any insights into what the truck driver's about, but is that the smallest little thing? And that's what started the whole thing. So Elwood, my husband, he's like, good. That's what he got. That's what you get. This is what you get. You broke the law. And this crazy truck driver is going to hold you to account. So I just thought that was hysterical because I kept watching that line from the rest of the film. But yeah, the very first time he passes, it's a solid line.
The way that the lines on highways worked was instituted in 1971, the year that this came out. So it's entirely
ignorance of the law is no excuse.
Exactly. Yeah,
Thank you.
ignorance is not bliss. I'm sorry.
I like that theory. I like your husband's theory. I do not want to know why the trucker is after him.
Exactly.
I think this is one of the great motiveless villains in cinema. It's hard to do right. Sometimes you want the motive. Sometimes you can't engage with the drama and the conflict unless you know why the killer, wants to kill. But when it's done right, it's just so deeply terrifying. And that's part of why I think this is Spielberg's scariest film, because you just don't know.
Very similar to The Hitcher in that regard. It's like there is no answer. And I mean, if anything, it's I want you to stop me. Like, are you able? The title is something I do want to talk about. The idea of it being a duel, he does not invite this, but he is definitely challenged to it, and he tries to run away from it. He does not want to fight this truck, but you do see things continue to escalate and escalate. Loves to challenge people to duels because he knows he's going to be superior. The truck, of course, says, I've been doing this a long time, and I'm packing a lot more heat than you are.
Except up hills. That's about it.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you, Colin. I don't want to know. I liked the theory that he put out there, but like AC said, I'm a writer. I'm always about what's the motivation? Why are they doing this? So I have that underlying, I kind of would like a little bit, but then I look back and I'm like, no, because then nothing that you can be given would be enough. It would never pay off. It wouldn't be enough. You wouldn't be happy, but there's still that little piece of me. It's like, let's get the side of the story from the trucker. See what it's doing.
But I don't think it ever falls into because he's crazy. This is what this beast does. And it is presented as a beast. Again, the idea that it's not so much a man as it is this thing, this truck that will chase you down and kill you.
That's why I've heard so many comparisons to Jaws, because Quint says it. It's like it's a remorseless eating machine. I mean, this is the exact same thing. We don't know. And it does kind of what you're referencing, AC, is that it's just an innate behavior. That's just what it does. Same as the shark. You can't hold it accountable.
This isn't Christine. I mean, I'm listening to everyone talk about the supernatural elements of this. After I watched it, I thought of The Strangers, actually, because in The Strangers, there was no motivation whatsoever other than you were home. And it's a micro version of what that film is, because they are everywhere in that house. They know everything. And no matter how hard they fight, they can't win, no matter how hard they do. Because, I mean, if it was a Christine kind of story, I would get it. I would understand the supernatural. I don't get it. I look at him as a bully. I look at the truck as a bully. I look at it. And, the simple symbolism of flammable, when you look at the truck and see it all over there, it's so beautiful because, you have connections to both of them. You've been on the receiving end of someone who's been an asshole, excuse the expression, on the road that's caused you road rage, but also you've been that aggressor on the road as well. You've cut through line. You haven't used a signal. Spielberg's ahead of his time. I don't know how they were in 1970. It was before my due date, but I will say to it there, he had an understanding of what it's been like for decades now on what it's like to be on the road. So I look at more of The Strangers, Michael, and I'm glad you agree with me on that.
Agreed.
With that kind of thing. And that film came decades later.
Because why'd you do this? Because why not? Yeah. Well, I want to bring up the fact that you brought up the flammable. I think that is the best non-payoff in any film.
Yes.
I love that. It's like the whole time, but it also makes sense that he was not carrying anything because he was hauling ass. It's
Right.
like you can't be going that fast if you have that much, but that is such an incredible payoff.
In the story, the truck does explode.
Yeah.
The studio wanted it to explode too, and they threatened to film it without Spielberg if he didn't agree to do it. He and his producers said no, and they eventually won.
So he fought for the non-payoff, and that was deliberate.
Yep.
I'm glad, because I love the non-payoff. Same as Michael. I think it's just so.
I agree.
I'd like to go back to that comparison to Jaws for a second. I mean, it's significant that the sound cue that he puts over the dying truck is the same sound cue that he superimposes over the dying shark in Jaws.
That truck's final plunge down the mountainside. Apparently, Spielberg had like 7 different cameras set up because he wanted to be able to cut back and forth to different angles. One camera operator was able to capture that entire fall and keeping the cab in frame, keeping the tank in frame. And then when one of them slipped out came the tanker out of the cloud. And I mean, Spielberg himself was just like, that could not have gone any better.
And it's a good thing they only have one truck.
That's what I was just going to say. Yeah.
Well, that's why they had 7 cameras. But I think Billy Goldenberg, that's our composer, like what the cues that he's offering during that final descent down the mountain, I just love. I love that kind of like ring. It feels like a dream. The fact that it's happening in slow motion, it's just an extraordinary conclusion. And I think, as you were saying, Cullen, it isn't the explosive thing that we've been led to believe we're going to have. It becomes something more magical. It becomes something that more mythical, more epic.
Sort of like, sorry, so not to interrupt you, but like he killed a guy.
Yeah.
Yes, that's where I was going.
It shouldn't be
Triumphant.
Yeah, perfect word. Yes. Yeah, it shouldn't be.
But it's interesting though, that final shot of him, and they do that kind of dissolve of 2 different angles of him, and he's just tossing rocks.
Yep.
I was thinking about like, what does that mean? Because it does seem kind of,
every time you sit down on the edge of a cliff, you want to toss rocks over it. I mean, that's just me.
Yeah.
I know, but based on what just happened, what is his mindset?
I don't think he's necessarily exultant because he defeated the truck. I think he's exultant because he survived. This is very much sort of the Matheson existentialism. I mean, it's the same end as in The Shrinking Man, where Scott Carey's last words are, "I still exist."
Because I think it is both of those things, Cullen. I think it is the triumph of having survived. It's the triumph of having conquered this foe, but then also the realization of, this is what I was driven to. This is not the conclusion I would have wanted. As a self-defense instructor, this is one of the things we come up against a lot of the time, is that assailants, there's empathy for them. There's clearly something damaged in them, and that's why they are perpetrating these crimes. And that is one of the things that keeps people from fighting back, is they're like, oh, I don't want to hurt them. That's not who I am. And I feel like that's what David Mann is driven to, having to defend himself to the point of death, to the point of having to kill somebody in order to preserve his own life. His nonviolence is not going to work in this scenario, right? This is where violence is the only answer. And I think there's a sadness about that, about realizing that there was no other way I could continue to survive if I did not end this other person's life.
But I'd be curious to see what his post thing is, because like you've been describing him as milquetoast, right? So what happens now? We're never going to know that, but it's like, are you a bigger tiger in business now? I'm really curious, like how does your life look now? Because obviously you're not going to serve time. I mean, obviously the authorities are going to see, but as far as psychologically and, how you move throughout your day, what is it going to be like now? Are you more confident?
He's going to go beat up the guy, Mike. He's going to be.
That's what I'm thinking. I thought that too.
The guy.
He's going to continue that. Yeah.
I think he's got a really hellacious insurance claim ahead of him.
Yeah.
All kinds of paperwork.
I don't know that David Mann becomes the toxic male.
Right.
No.
He is so shocked by this trucker's behavior. I didn't do anything. Why are you doing this to me? He believes in rules.
Which goes back to what I wanted to talk about with the idea of this being a duel, since it's the title of the film. And that sequence where he gets out of the car and he stalks directly towards the truck. And the truck doesn't move, doesn't do anything until he gets close enough. And then you have this sort of exchange where the trucker is basically setting the rules of engagement. And it's the same point where Mann realizes that he has to, for want of a better term, man up. He has to find his courage to actually fight the duel, and you can see it in the way that he's shot. And there's that wonderful sequence of cuts, but that go in on his face it's a little bit like the cut in Frankenstein where you see the monster's face for the first time, but different completely here. You sense a change at that point, and both in Weaver's performance and in the way that he's filmed. This doesn't necessarily mean that he's sane at that point, though, because after that point, whenever Spielberg wants to show what his state of mind is, he has this extreme close-up with a really short lens that just sort of projects Weaver's features into space and makes him look just completely berserk.
See, I don't think he was going to be toxically or like a toxic masculine figure. I just feel like he finally had come to his own. I don't feel like he's going to go home and, give his wife the what for because of the fight or whatever. But it's like, it just feels like he's not going to be a pushover anymore. I don't think to any state of violence on his own end, but he's like, okay, I've lived through this. I know what I'm capable of. I'm going to use that hopefully to better my situation.
To be honest, if you've never seen the body out of that truck, how do you know it's not him in the end? I hate to throw a conspiracy theory out there, but again, there's elements of this movie that feel like it's his psychosis that is splintering there and what's going on. It's certain things that I see in the film. Nonetheless, it's interesting, though, Michael, what you bring up about the aspect of him not going, how it's going to increase his life. Is it really going to change who he is? I'm not necessarily sure, because he was that way for how many years before this happened. This might linger with him. There might be a PTSD from it. But to be honest, I'm not necessarily sure it's going to increase him that much.
Okay, so I'm an optimist.
You are, and I appreciate you for that. That's okay. I appreciate you for that.
Colin, what are your thoughts?
I don't really care. The story is the story. It ends where it's supposed to. That's where Colin, that's where I'm at too, is that this is kind of like the perfect ending for this movie, is that, and then, the truck rolled down the hill and he sat there on the edge and threw rocks into the pit.
And the wheel grinds to a halt.
There is that beautiful kind of short story quality to it, that here's the setup, here's how it plays out, and here's the conclusion. The idea of him it's interesting, the Hitcher and this one both end with our heroes having conquered their antagonist, but it looks like it has come at a great cost. They are changed forever. There's the before this incident and there's the after this incident.
Well, my thought on the Hitcher is, because I haven't seen it in a while, but we don't get a lot of Jim Halsey's backstory, do we? I don't recall, right?
I think we get about as much backstory as we get of David Mann.
But we get more from David Mann, I'm assuming. We see his family. So.
Well,
I'm just saying it's like it feels like for David, there's more at stake. So that's, I think, why my brain at the end is like, where does this go? Like, how does this affect his daily life? Because it feels like there's plenty of information. We know he's some kind of client guy, hedge manager, whatever, but it's like, I feel like there's more there that invites post thoughts. And I guess that's to the credit of the film and of those scenes, like the scene they added with the wife. It's like, this guy's real. For me, it just automatically invites, how does this work now?
The other film, it was kind of eating away at the corner of my brain earlier when we were talking about Straw Dogs and Deliverance. Another one that this reminds me a lot of is The Hills Have Eyes. And I think that has a similar modernity. A friend of mine says that in trying to evolve a taxonomy of American folk horror, that the road trip, any American film with a road trip in it has elements of folk horror, because it's such a defining the frontierism. It's such an important like founding myth of our culture. And when you throw in the Western elements with the Duel as well, I mean, there's a lot of like American iconography that this is playing with. And the whole idea of the interstate highway system, which I don't actually think he's on. I think the road that most of this takes place on is an older highway. So it's kind of like that psycho, off the beaten path. These places have been kind of left behind by modernity because everything switched over to the freeway now. That element, I think, is very Hills Have Eyes-y as well. It's almost like time travel. And when you do go down those roads, when you do you deliberately avoid the interstate, and I think there's a part even in the story where he says he could have taken the interstate and he's like mad that he didn't because it's a 2-lane highway. There is that sort of sense of city folk kind of time traveling. And you look at those roadside motels and diners and stuff, gulf of worlds between the city dweller and what's actually out there.
Well, it's also similar in the fact that with the family in Hills Have Eyes, they're pushed to the limit as well, and then they are able to see what barbarism and what violence is within them that they're capable of. And it's that same thing here, because we're in a polite society, but clearly this truck and this driver don't play by those rules. Same with the mutant family in the Hills Have Eyes. It's like they have their own way about doing things, and so we're going to bring you down and show you the ugly side of yourself.
And you know what? In that diner, when he goes in there and he thinks he's approaching the guy behind the truck, and the guy behind the truck is actually, or the guy having his lunch is actually way nicer than he is. That it's such a juxtaposition of what's going on, and it's one of the funnier scenes that evolves into what it's going to be, and him showing that aggression.
I was really wishing that guy would just swallow his bite of his sandwich before answering the question.
Yeah, he's like
mouthful, dude.
Well, two things. That beer continuity was absolutely dreadful, as was his mustache length, which we understand now was shot in 2 different parts, right? But that is the biggest, most ornate cheese sandwich I have ever seen in my life. I'm like, good for you. That's good value for your money.
Well, they had to give him a cheese sandwich because Dennis Weaver was a vegetarian.
Is that right?
Oh.
Actually, I was reading up on him. He was a huge environmental crusader. His home was built of recycled tires and soda cans and things like that. I was like, awesome. I love you, Dennis Weaver.
With that sandwich, is there a subtle little bit of sort of classism there where he spells rye for the waitress?
Yes.
It wasn't they didn't pick up on it, and there wasn't really a reaction moment, for the server. When
she does. She reacts.
Yeah,
she does. Yes.
It was so subtle that it passed me by because I didn't see it. But yeah, it doesn't really further develop that side of his character, though.
Well, I mean, it kind of plays into the idea. He is a little douchey, right? So that didn't strike me as odd. It's like, of course, that's what he'd say. And I don't think he thought about it for her. I think that's just an automatic. That's just what I don't know. It felt like that's just what he would do with anybody.
No, it's emphasized even more when he's throwing the snake cages at the truck.
I hate that.
Why are you throwing my snakes? Why are you throwing them?
That's the big tragedy of this film, is that poor woman and her business.
Yes.
We all feel for the snake lady.
What an incredible sequence of the truck closing in on him in the phone booth, because that was all Dennis Weaver, apparently. It's all one shot. They had it cued with the stunt guy that Dennis Weaver would exit the telephone booth. What about that incredible barrel roll that Dennis Weaver does in the car and comes right up to the camera?
Clearly him.
That was incredible. But Weaver apparently did a lot of his own driving, because you can tell that it's him in a car, not being pulled by a trailer. There's a lot of really stuff that's impressive. I was watching this behind the scenes featurette, and Spielberg was talking about how he kind of mapped out the route.
He used a map instead of storyboards.
Yeah, knowing where he was at in the story based on where they were on the road. And one of the ways he got as much coverage as he did was that he would set up 5 cameras along the road, and you would get 5 different angles of the truck and the car going by. Then he would take the cameras and put them on the other side of the road and get 5 more shots of car and truck going by. And because the angles were different, it all looked different. So the coverage was different. He was able to get a lot. The studio definitely wanted him to take it inside. They wanted him to shoot it in the studio and not, use process shots outside of the car. And he's like, no, that's going to look terrible. And so they made him a deal that if he could shoot the first day, and if he fell behind at all, then he would have to take it inside. But he managed to stay on schedule, and so they let him shoot the entire film on location, which it speaks to Spielberg, the filmmaker that we would come to know. Like, this is somebody with a lot of ingenuity, but also just his determination to make this happen. Question for all of you: when this title came up on the list of films that we're going to be discussing this year, what was it about this film that attracted you to do it? Why would you want to be on this particular episode?
I don't know what it is about this particular shot, but it has stuck with me. The washing machine framing, even though I've only seen this film like maybe 3 times, I don't know. That has stuck with me as like, that is the coolest thing I have ever seen. And it's I don't know. And that's always stuck with me as like as a filmmaker, wannabe filmmaker, whatever. I'm like, that is brilliant. And that seems so out of character for Spielberg, knowing the rest of his catalog. Like, that just seems so obvious. I don't know how to explain it, but that has been such an iconic moment for me. Just the character work with the lady doing her laundry, but the way it's framed and just the intensity of the film. Like, those are the 2 things that have just stuck with me. Like we talked about earlier, I came in sight unseen. I didn't know anything about this when I first saw it, and it just blew my mind. Last night's viewing, it doesn't hold up exactly the same, but you know what? I still got a kick out of it. Had a great time, but it's the laundromat.
It's the beautiful thing of a filmmaker calling attention to himself, but also doing it in a way that feels like it is actually serving the story. It's creating environment, creating mood, creating atmosphere, creating claustrophobia. Also a kind of like just a nudge to be like, hey, there's somebody making this movie.
Exactly. Look at how clever I am.
I really like the movie. It's a really scary movie, and I hadn't watched it in a while. I'm sorry. I don't think I have a good answer to this, man. I just be vibing. I'm sorry.
Jay?
For me, I mean, again, it goes back to Bravo's scariest movie moments, and watching it after that and then revisiting it years and years later, it really is that truck. That truck is scary, and it's as visually a monster as you're going to find. And the man behind the wheel is an even bigger monster because he's the one that's leading it. Makes me think of Death Proof with the way that if that character is not that character, Stuntman Mike is not that character behind that car, it's not the same for me. And to have that anonymous face behind the wheel with only like 1 or 2 POV shots in the entire film, looking out through that windshield, especially towards the end, that's what really got me about the film. And when I had a chance to talk about it and saw on the list, AC, also returned with the railroad track across the front, the tension it builds for it, because the whole film, whether you like it, you don't like it, whatever it is, it's so tense throughout, and it just gets more and more. And don't get me wrong, there are times in this film that he, in my opinion, struggling to get through this narrative. We have to add stuff to be able to push it and push it and push it. And that's a problem I had with it watching it this past week, is that there's a couple times where I feel it's a little bit too long in between. But you can't have a continuous be on the road the entire time without bringing other characters in, without that narrative being expanded, without giving reason and pushing everything forward. So the building of the tension on the road, that railroad tie, and Michael, I got to agree with you again. That shot through that washer, I had forgotten about it, but that's such a brilliant shot in the film.
Oh, I had seen Spielberg's West Side Story in the theater, and I got it into my head that I wanted to write about early Spielberg because I wanted to know if the film sense, for want of a better word, that Spielberg brings to every movie was there at the start. And so I started over the last year and a half or so looking at the earliest Spielberg artifacts that I could find. His episode of Night Gallery, for instance. I tracked down his episode of Marcus Welby. I've watched his episode of Columbo about 4 times in the last 2 years, and it's absolutely there. There's a shot in that episode of Columbo that I can't believe they let him do. And it's just Columbo making eggs in a kitchen, but it's a oneer. It's one of Spielberg's famous oneers, and obviously this is in that cluster. And I also watched the film he made after this, Something Evil, which is not nearly this good. That film was written by Robert Clouse, I think, who is most well known for directing Enter the Dragon.
And Jim Cotta.
And the big brawl with Jackie Chan. Yeah, there's a level of talent between the screenplays there. But even so, that film still has some of Spielberg in it. You can see it. I wanted to talk about Spielberg. I wanted to talk about early Spielberg. There's a lot of this film in the Sugarland Express, which is another car film. There's a lot of this film in Jaws, which we've discussed, and there's a lot of this film in Close Encounters as well. I mean, that scene where at the beginning of Close Encounters, where Roy Neary is at that intersection, stopped, and a pair of lights pulls up behind him. That's absolutely this film.
I'm very curious if George Miller studied this prior to the Mad Max films, because there's so much amazing camera work, and it felt like that same kind of level of intensity. But the other thing I just wanted to point out real quick, my favorite, rewatching it last night, my favorite other than my laundromat with the lady in her laundry, is the quietest moment of this in the film, when he has that little montage of him parked and napping near the railroad tracks. And that is so stunning to me. It's like, okay, and of course the red car is the center. I'm like, that blew my mind. That is so beautiful. And it's the quietest moment of the film. So I'm like, I thought it's amazing.
There is a shot at the beginning of this film that I swear to God looks like it is the inspiration for the first shot in Star Wars. It's the scene where the truck passes man after man has already passed the truck, and it's shot in a way, and it's turned on its side because cars. It's shot in a way where it seems like the truck is an endless menacing thing, and it looks just like the Star Destroyer in Star Wars. And I know that Lucas had seen this film. There's a conversation with George Lucas in the biopic that or the biographical documentary that HBO made a couple of years ago, in which he described seeing this film the night that it aired, as a favor to Spielberg, because he was friends with him. But he was only intending to watch like the first 15 minutes of it, because he was over at Francis Ford Coppola's house, and they were drinking wine and whatnot. And he wound up watching the entire thing, and then he went into the kitchen to find Francis, and he said, "You need to see this film. This kid knows what he's doing."
Turned out to be very prescient, because yes, this was the movie that gave him his career. Showed him that he could make a feature film, and it had great success overseas. Definitely shored things up with Universal, and Sid Sheinberg was proven correct that this is the wunderkind that we're gonna give the keys to the kingdom to.
Just think, if it weren't for Duel, we wouldn't have the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
You gotta ruin it, Colin. Why
It's
you
not
gotta
a
hurt?
world I want to live in, man.
Let's circle back around. Let's offer our final thoughts on Duel celebrating its 55th anniversary. Jay, I'm so glad you made it. Let's go ahead and start things off.
Well, thank you again. My apologies again for running late from work. It's just so much fun to watch, and I'm glad to revisit AC. I'm glad that you brought me on. Why not as knowledgeable about things Spielberg and this film as I'd like to be. It's just a great watch, and the tension that's created between the truck and the lead character it's palpable, and it's a wonderful villain. And again, it reminds you of so many different films over so many different decades, and the impact and the influence that this film has had. So it's absolutely wonderful. And AC, thank you for having me on for it.
Appreciate you, Jay. Christiana.
It's a film that I like a lot. People should see it.
Cullen.
I love that this is a film that we can have the is it supernatural or not conversation about, and that no one can be proven right or wrong. There's a mysteriousness about it. There's this kind of ineffable, I mean, it's it's legendary because it's the first feature film of one of the most iconic film directors ever. It draws on so much history, the Orson Welles, the Hitchcock especially. It's just full of question marks. I think there's something very like, it almost feels like you're watching something underground or like forbidden in a way. There's elisions in it, you know. There's gaps and there's spaces that you can fill in. I can't think of another film that is so well exposed and well understood that still has this kind of underlying mystery to it.
And Michael,
I think the strength of it is that is such a basic, like if you put the log line or a quick 2-second pitch, it's like, okay. But the fact that, 55 years later, we're still talking about it. We're still talking about potential theories. Like you said, is it supernatural? Is it not? For a chase movie, it's like, with no real character development. I mean, there's some, but there's just not a lot there. And the fact that it's still we're enamored by it and it's iconic. It's a must see. If you're a film person, it's like, you have to see it. And again, just to see where it all began.
I think that's one of the things that strikes me is that, yes, it has become an important film because it is Spielberg's debut feature. At the same time, I think it's a good enough film that we would still be talking about it. It would be that film that you saw on television and you remembered and you would tell your kids about. You would hope that it would come on again. The fact that it has had a life beyond the small screen, I think, is a real blessing for all of us. And I really enjoyed having this conversation tonight. It was great going back to the movie and knowing that we were all going to be able to chat about it on our way to work. Thank you all so much. Looking forward to having you all on again very soon. And until next time, keep searching, keep exploring, and keep sharing the scare and the road.